Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is SUKKAH Daf Yud. We begin 9 lines from the top of the Amid. Says the Gemara, Kama Yehei, Bein SUKKAH LeSUKKAH, Utehei Tachtoin Psula. Yesterday we discussed the halacha of a sukkah which is situated Tachas HaSukkah, one sukkah beneath the other one. The lower sukkah is now pasul. It's learned from a pasuk which says Basukah is Teishvu Shivas Yamim. It's spelled Basukas Teishvu, and therefore we learn it needs to be a single sukkah as opposed to a sukkah which is below another sukkah, says the Gemara. But how high is the top sukkah? In which case the bottom sukkah will now be considered a sukkah beneath another sukkah and be pasul. The Gemara is assuming that if the SUKKAH of the upper sukkah is so very close to the SUKKAH of the lower sukkah, then both levels of SUKKAH are really considered one and the same SUKKAH, in which case the sukkah beneath it is really a single sukkah. There must be some height requirement, some minimum height requirement to the top sukkah, which makes it into a sukkah, in which case the bottom sukkah is now considered a lower level, a sukkah beneath a sukkah. So kama yehe ben sukkah l'sukkah, how much space between one SUKKAH and the other, ute'ei tachtoin psula, in which case the bottom one will now be considered one sukkah below the other sukkah and be pasul. We have 3 shittas. Amar Afuna tefach. The top sukkah needs to be at least 1 tefach high. Shekei matzinu, because we find a precedent to an oyel tefach. Ba'ahale tuma tefach. We find that when it comes to tumas oil, the shear of that oil is tefach. So if you have a roof over just merely a gap, a space, a tefach high, that roof is considered oil with respect to tuma, in which case we see that even an area which is a tefach high is considered somewhat a mokim, oil, and likewise over here by sukkah. Although, of course, we know that the minimum shear in height for a sukkah to be kosher is 10 tefachim, as we learned earlier. Over here, we don't need that in order to invalidate the bottom sukkah. As long as the top sukkah resembles at least somewhat the concept of an oil, then we now consider the bottom sukkah to be buried beneath the top one. It's a sukkah tachas, a sukkah, and it's pasul. Says the Gemara, where do we find that tuma works with the concept of oyel tefach desnan? Tefach al tefach. You have an empty space, a tefach long by tefach wide, berum tefach, a tefach high as well. Maybe it's a tuma. So now this oil hovering above this small tefach by tefach by tefach space is considered a roof and is maybe a satuma. It brings tuma, it presents a barrier before tuma, meaning suppose there's some tuma lying in this tefach by tefach by tefach cube, this little space, and there's a roof above it. This oil will now transfer the tuma to the entire area, throughout the entire roofed area below this oil. So let's say there's tuma on one side of this oil, and there's a kli under the other side of the oil. This is considered an oil which brings around, it distributes the tuma throughout the area. That's called mevius hatuma, and it's also choytes ibnei hatuma, which means that the roof presents a barrier to the tuma, in which case the tuma will stop short right at that roof. It won't continue upward beyond that oil, as opposed to where you don't have a space large enough, a tefach by tefach by tefach, in which case the roof above it doesn't really constitute oil. Aval pachos mirum tefach, but if the space is less than a tefach high, it's not really an oil now, and therefore loy maybe the roof cannot bring the tumah around to all areas beneath that roof, and nor is it going to prevent the tumah from spreading further, from spreading upward, because the tumah is not really considered as a tumah inside an oil. It's buried, it's suffocated by materials, in which case it's called a tumah ritzutza. It just extends upwards, it protrudes throughout the area. It means it just goes up in a straight line. Anything above it, even beyond that oil, if it's right above the place of a tumah, will become tummy. In any case, we see that there is a concept of oil when the space beneath it is a tefach high. Here as well, says the Gemara, as long as the upper sukkah is a tefach high, in which case the SUKKAH of that sukkah is hovering over a makom oil, a makom that is considered halachically, at least regarding tumah, as a roofed area. That sukkah has nachashivas, in which case the sukkah beneath it, the lower level, is considered sukkah tachas sukkah. So that's Rav Huna's shita, shir of tefach. Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna Amri, they maintain the upper sukkah needs to be at least arba, 4 tefachim in height. Why? Shalom atzinu makim chashav pachas me'arba. We never find that an area less than 4 tefachim is considered a makim chashav. Rashi will bring some examples. So in any case, they hold that the upper sukkah needs to be at least 4 tefachim high, which will give it prominence, in which case now the hut beneath it is considered a sukkah beneath the sukkah. Ushmuel Amar Asara. He holds, no. Unless the upper sukkah is exactly 10 tefachim high. That's the minimum sheer requirement for a dira of a sukkah. So now it's a kosher sukkah, and the sukkah beneath it is really a sukkah tachas sukkah. My time in the Shmuel, what's the reason for this? Keach shera, just as 10 tefachim is the shear which provides hechsher to a sukkah. Kach psula, likewise, for that upper sukkah to invalidate the sukkah below it, that upper sukkah needs to have a sheer kashrus. Now it's roi to be used for a sukkah, and therefore the sukkah beneath it is considered sukkah tachas sukkah. Ma'ach sheira ba'asara, afsula ba'asara. Let's go over to Rashi. So where the lines widen, right at the line before the wide. V'kama yehei, says Rashi. V'kama yehei hefsek ben schach l'schach. This is going back to the initial question that the Gemara presents. How much space between schach to schach? V'tipsal atachtoina mishum sukkah tach sukkah. The loy neim achat sukkah. If the two schachos are too close together, of course it's just one sukkah. There must be some gap, some space in between, for us to consider the upper sukkah as a separate entity. How much space? We have 3 shitos. Rav Huna says tefach. Aval batzim et tefach chat schachu. But if the space is less than a tefach, it's really one and the same schach. It's not a sukkah tachas a sukkah. It's one schach. It's one roof for one sukkah. Where do we find the shear of tefach? Tefach a tefach b'rum tefach. Maybe it's a tumah. V'choytz is b'fnei a tumah. Says Rashi halacha l'moshe mesinayu that the minimum size of an oil is tefach by tefach and a tefach high. Aval pachas mit tefach loy maybe v'loy choytz. What does that mean? Loy maybe is a tumah. It can't distribute, it can't transport the tumah. Im tumah tachas roishay echad. Suppose you have an oil, tumah beneath one side, v'kelim tachas roishay sheni, and there are kelim under the other side of that oil. V'yikoyra arucha urucha v'tefach. We're speaking about a long beam, which is tefach wide. Uru'uya lahavi tumah, in which case now the koira is a tefach wide. Theoretically, he's fit for transporting of tumah, but since the space beneath that koira is less than a tefach high, loy ma'isi, it won't bring it. Mishum deleka rum hefsek tefach mimenu v'lakarka, because there's less than a tefach between himself and the ground below. Therefore, he's not considered an oil. And likewise, he can't stop the tumah from spreading. Im yesh kli al gaba, suppose there's a kli on that beam, which is situated right over the tumah. Afilu ad l'rakia tami. Well, anything directly above that tumah, even up until the sky, will be tami. The tumah ritzutza she'en la'oil tefach, but ka'as v'oila, because a tumah ritzutza, which is a tumah which has been buried, suffocated, without leaving at least a tefach of space between himself and the oil, That tumah just breaks through and rises all the way up. Anything in its way becomes tummy. So we see that you need at least a oil which is a tefach high to be considered. And therefore as well, by sukkah tachas sukkah, the top sukkah needs to be at least a tefach in height. The next shita was 4 tefach. Shalom atzina mokem choshev. Luis rishus la'atzmai. We never find that a space less than 4 tefachim is considered its own rishus, its own domain. Like Carmelis, v'lo rishus hayachid pachas mer'abah. K'da omar b'yitzias HaShabbos. Where Shabbos tells us that you can't make a rishus hayachid or a Carmelis for that sake if the floor space is less than 4 tefachim wide by 4 tefachim long. V'chanami lav rishus la'atzmahi la'kri sukkah tachas sukkah. Here as well, in order for the bottom sukkah to be considered sukkah under a sukkah, then the upper sukkah needs to be at least 4 tefachim in height, which gives it a chashivas. Now it's interesting, Rashi is comparing it to Rishus HaYachid or Carmelis. Well, over there we're speaking about the floor area. The floor space needs to be at least 4 by 4. We aren't necessarily speaking about goiva, height, which is really more than 4. We learned this earlier, that the minimum height of Rishus is 10 tefachim. So actually Tosfos brings another aspect into play. He says we find in the Gemara Eruvin that l'inyan goiva, with respect to height, 4 tefachim does play a role. We're speaking about a pesach between 2 chatzeros, so if the wall between them has a window which is at least 4 tefachim high, it's considered a pesach between 2 chatzeros. So we do see that the concept of abor tefachim pertains to height as well. Here as well says the Gemara regarding the height of the upper sukkah. The SUKKAH needs to be at least 4 tefachim above its own floor. That gap, that distance, creates a chashivas. It gives it prominence, chashivas, in which case we consider the upper sukkah as a place on its own. And now the lower level is considered a sukkah beneath a sukkah. Shmuel maintains 10 tefachim at a minimum. Look, the pasuk is applying a psul to the bottom sukkah because he's a sukkah, tachas a sukkah. We have 2 sukkahs. If so, v'chiles babel yoynech shor sukkah, lav sukkah hivalei pasla. If so, says Shmuel, what follows is that unless the upper sukkah has a sheer hechsher sukkah, which is 10 tefachim high, in which case it's suitable for mitzvah sukkah, why then would you consider the bottom sukkah as a sukkah tachas a sukkah? So according to him, it needs to be at least 10 tefachim high. Continues the Gemara. Tanan, let's take a look at our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, im ein diyurin bel yoina. If there is nobody living in the upper sukkah, hatachtoinik shir, now the bottom sukkah is kosher. That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, my ein diyurin. What does the Mishnah mean? When Rabbi Yehuda says, if there are no diyurin bel yoina, the bottom one is kosher. Ilay ma diyurin mamish. We're speaking about actual dwellers. Meaning if there's nobody living there, then the bottom one is kosher. Why would that make any difference? Ato diyurin kagarmi? Dwellers, residents, are making a difference here? They are the determining factor here. If the upper one is a sukkah, then the bottom one is possible. Who cares whether or not there are people actually living in the upper sukkah? Elalav, rather it must be that what he meant was as follows. My ain't the urine. If the upper one doesn't have the urine, he meant kol she'eina ru'uy l'dira. If the upper sukkah is not fit for dwelling, then we say, don't reckon with it. And the bottom one is kosher. And what does this mean? If the upper sukkah isn't 10 tefachim high, in which case it's not fit for dira, for mitzvah sukkah, then we don't have to take it into account, and the bottom one is kosher, and that is who? Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Michlal the Tanakama Savra, apparently, a Tanakama who is his bar plukta. Rabbi Yehuda is coming to challenge the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda says, I hold the top one needs to be 10 tefachim high. Apparently the Tanakama holds you don't need that condition. Michal Tanakama Savra, afal pisha ain't a ru'uy l'dira. It's still psula. That's a kasha on Shmuel. It would seem that Tanakama holds that even if the upper one is less than 10 tefachim high, it's still considered a sukkah with respect to consider the tachton as a sukkah tachas a sukkah. It's a kasha on Shmuel, who lays down 10 tefachim as a precondition. Says the Marki Asur Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, Amar, he said, Amri b'marav, and as Yisrael, they explained the Mishnah differently. We're not speaking about residence. We're not speaking about height or size. You know what Rabbi Yehuda meant? Im ein hatachtoina yichoylu lekabel korem uksosei shel elyon. If the bottom sukkah cannot tolerate, cannot properly support, meaning the bottom schach, right, the schach covering the lower sukkah, is not strong enough. It's eino yichoylu lekabel. It can't accept, it can't support the korem uksosei shel elyon. The pillows, blankets, the linen, meaning a sleeping person with his linen from the lying in the upper sukkah. So it can't support that. Then we don't consider the top sukkah as a place of dira. We don't consider the top one as a real sukkah. And now it's all one in the same sukkah, and the bottom one is kosher. So all Rabbi Yehuda meant to say was, in order for it to be considered a sukkah, the floor of that sukkah needs to sustain, needs to support a sleeping person. But as far as height, that's not, that wasn't the point of the discussion. And perhaps Shmuel's correct that, it needs to be at least 10 tefachim high, l'kul yam. Rabbi Yehuda's chiddush was that the schach, the floor of the upper sukkah, needs to be strong enough. Apparently the Tanakama will hold that's not needed. Even if it can't support, it's still possible, meaning we'll still consider the lower sukkah as a sukkah underneath a sukkah, even though the top one doesn't really have a floor to work with, because it's not strong enough to support much. Is that so? Hard to believe. Says the Gemara, you're right. If the floor can support properly, all agree, it's a sukkah tachas sukkah. If the floor cannot support at all agree, just ignore the top sukkah. It's all one entity. You know what the point of contention here is? Between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, the choyle lekabel al yidei atchak. We're speaking that the upper floor can barely sustain the karmic sauces. It could support it, but barely. You move too hard, you fall through it. So, on the one hand, it's royal dira. On the other hand, it's not really a proper dira. Tanakama says that is sufficient to consider it a sukkah, in which case the bottom sukkah is now a sukkah tachas a sukkah, whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds, if it's only a day atchak, the top sukkah isn't really a mokem dira, and now it's all just one sukkah, and the bottom sukkah is kosher. Let's go over to Rashi, 12 lines from the bottom. Humishan Iku Benayu. We're speaking where it could sustain with difficulty. The Rabbana Savri, given the Choyle L'Kabel with Doichak, since it could support, even though it's B'Doichak, we say Shem Sukkah Al Yoina, the top one is considered a sukkah, Umifsla Tachtoina, in which case the bottom one is possible because it's a sukkah beneath another one. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, no, given the Lekha Shmisha Lahedya, since the upper sukkah doesn't really provide proper usage, Lav Shem Sukkah Allah, Del Yoina, the upper one is not considered a sukkah, and the Ram points out that evidently Rabbi Yehuda is l'shitasa. Back on the Zayin we said that Rabbi Yehuda holds sukkah as diras kavah, it's meant to present as a permanent dwelling, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda holds unless that upper sukkah can provide the goods, it can serve as a proper makim dira. You don't have to reckon with it, in which case the bottom one is no longer considered a sukkah tachas sukkah. So, conclusion, we discussed the psul of sukkah tachas sukkah. How high does a top sukkah have to be? We have three shittas: either a tefach, like we find by oil tumah, 4 tefachim, which makes it a makam chashiv, or 10 tefachim, that's shmuel, because that's a shir hechsher sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda adds that the upper sukkah is only to be considered a sukkah, if it can sustain, it can support the urine. Shaloi b'doichak. Continues the Mishnah. Pireis alheo sadin. He spread a sheet over his schach, b'pnei achama, to protect it from excessive sunlight. Oy tachteo b'pnei hanishar. Or suppose he hung a sheet beneath his schach to collect the nishar, falling branches and falling leaves. In both cases, sukkah is possible because a sheet is not something ro'i for schach. Schach needs to be something which is A, not makabel tumah, not a clear finished utensil, and B, it has to be something which grows from the ground. So this sadin, this material sheet, is none of the above, and therefore it invalidates the schach, because now the sukkah has schach which is possible. A third example is Oishe Pires al Gabi Akinef. He spread a sheet over his kinef. He formed a canopy over his bed. Kinef is the four-pole arrangement, so there are 4 poles rising from 4 corners of his bed, and he spread a sheet above it as a canopy. Psula. Why? Because he is underneath a canopy, underneath an oil. He's not in a sukkah. Therefore, it's possible. Aval Purisu al Gabi Nakliti Amita. But he could spread a sheet on the Nakliti Amita. This is also a canopy, but this one only has 2 poles. So he has his bed, 1 pole on the right, 1 pole on the left. And now he runs a sheet over it. There's a string running between the poles. He runs a sheet above it, in which case he has a tent-like canopy, which doesn't really have a flat roof on it. It's an overturned V. It's like a tent which comes to a point. In which case it's not considered an oil. And sleeping beneath it is not considered to be outside the sukkah, and therefore it's kosher. Let's go over to Rashi. 10 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Masnissen, Hanishar. He spread a sheet below his schach to collect the nishar. Shelo yehu olen v'kismin neishon al shulchanai, so that leaves and spindles don't drop onto his table. V'sadin is a davar makabel tumu u'pasel schach k'delkaman. Oy shepiris al gabi kinef k'laymer. Oy afil le'pirisu nishar. Even in this case, where the point wasn't to create a protection, a schach for a sukkah, ela l'noyal mitasei, it was just for ornamental purposes, to form this canopy over his bed, it's still possible. Al gabi kinef, as Rashi, hein dalad kundesen, la dalad ragli amita, was speaking about these 4 poles situated at the 4 corners of his bed, ugavoin, and they rise up, umaniach klun sois mizelazeh, and he runs poles from these vertical poles to each other, al gabein, uperes alein sadin, on which he spreads a sheet to form as a canopy, v'rechika min haschach, and they're situated at a distance from the schach. The hashta loy mishum mesachich bedavar hamakabel tuma mifsala. So now he didn't really use it for schach. So the psul is not because he's using schach, which is unfit for schach, because he didn't spread these sheets to create a schach. He's just doing it for noi, for ornamental purposes, to decorate his bed. It's still a problem. Psula. The fact is, he's out of the sukkah. The oil, mafsik b'neim, he's in the oil. He's not in the sukkah. Aval, says the Mishnah, Pirasu, al gabi nakliti amita. But this arrangement is okay. What are nakliti amita? She'enan el shnayim. We're speaking only 2 poles. Ve'in yoitzin ve'emtza mita, which rise up from the middle of the bed. Echad l'mrash yiseh, 1 at the head post. Ve'echad l'ragleh, the other one down at the other side of the bed. V'noitzin klunsa mizelazeh, which they use as follows. They take a klunsa, some pole, and they run it from one vertical pole to the other vertical pole. Upersonal of sadin, over which they spread a sheet. V'mishapeh l'kan, which slants in both directions. So you have your bed, long bed, You have a pole towards the head, a pole towards the feet, and you run something across the top of one to the other. Now you spread a sheet over it, which ends up looking like an overturned V. It comes to a point, like a tent. So it doesn't really have a roof. It doesn't have a flat roof. In which case, it's not an oil. Since it doesn't have a flat tefach on top, oil, halachically, it's not considered an oil, and sleeping beneath it does not pose a concern. Says the Gemara, this that we learn in the Mishnah, that spreading a sheet over or below your SUKKAH invalidates the sukkah because the SUKKAH is now something which is makabel tumah, your sheet. That's only, says Rav Chizda, elo b'pnei hanishar, when it's there to collect the leaves, so you spread it beneath your SUKKAH as a collector, as a protector, as a shelter provider. So now you have SUKKAH pasal. Avalon oisa, but suppose his kavanah was to beautify the sukkah, to use it as a decoration. Lo oisa, no sukkah, kshera. Says Rav Chizda, now will be kosher, same sheet. But if it's there to beautify the sukkah, it's batal to the SUKKAH. The SUKKAH is kosher. Pshita, of course, this is the halacha. Look at the Mishnah. If he spreads it, to function as a protector, as a shelter provider, then it's a problem, because it's being used as SUKKAH, and it's SUKKAH pasal. It's pretty clear from the Mishnah that if the intention is to beautify the sukkah, there's no concern. So what is Rav Chizda's chiddush? It's clear in the Mishnah. Ma'alatema, perhaps I would think, huadin, dafilu lina oisa. No, perhaps the same halacha would apply even when he's using it as a decoration. Why then does the Mishnah describe it as being used b'pnei hanishar? That's just common practice. It's just a good example. But perhaps, even should he choose to use it as a decoration, the same halacha would apply. It would still be pasal kamash malan. Rav Chizda tells us, no, that's not the case. If it's being used as a decorator, and it's batal to the SUKKAH, and your sukkah is kosher. Leima Messiah, perhaps we'll have a right from the following price, that noyei sukkah don't pose a concern. So he spread proper SUKKAH over a sukkah. V'itra b'kramen, and he decorated the sukkah with design, clothing, embroidered garments, ubesadin hamatzuyarn, embroidered sheets, v'talaba, egoizin, shkedim, afarsakin, v'rimoinim, and he hung up throughout a sukkah nuts, shkedim, almonds, afarsakin, fruit, v'rimoinim, pomegranates, parchidav, anavim, clusters of grapes, v'ataris shalshi boilen, crown-shaped bundles of stalks, yenos, shmonim, eslasais, glass containers with wine, oil, and flour. Also listavik. These things are connected to your sukkah. They're designated for sukkah use. One may not use them throughout sukkahs. They're muktzah, even throughout Chol Hamoed. Ad moitzoi Yom Tov ha'achron shel Chag, until after the last Yom Tov of sukkahs. V'im hisna alein. However, if he established a condition, a t'nai, which should allow him to use them, we follow his condition. As Rashi will explain for us. In any case, we see clearly that sheets spread throughout your sukkah, the Gemara is assuming, even if they're below your SUKKAH, it's okay, because it's noyei sukkah. It's being used to decorate the sukkah, and it's batal to the sukkah, so it's right of Chizda. Says, we're not dilma min atzad. Perhaps we're not speaking about sheets spread beneath the SUKKAH. Rather, they were hung up along the sides, along the walls of the sukkah. In which case, of course, there's no concern. Says Rashi on top. So these decorations are off limits, unless he made a t'nai. Hakoy l'fei t'nai. How does that work? The only way to properly apply a t'nai is as follows. He declares, look, I'm not going to separate from them, meaning I'm going to still have their use throughout the Bein Hashmashos of the first Yom Tov, in which case the Lechal Kedusha Alayu. No Kedusha will be applied to them, in which case they will not be considered Muktzah, and he can use them throughout Yom Tov. V'hachi mukim lo b'Maseches Beitza b'Mahamevi, as described in Maseches Beitza. Utno achrina lemahanibu. That's the only way to make it tonight. Ktani miyas. At any rate, the Brisa says sadinin sheets are fine. Vainu siyata. That's a writer of Chizda. The women outside. L'tfanis ka'amar. They're running along the walls. Avalam mal. But were they blocking your schach? Hey malach afilu na'isa nami. Misach b'mekavot tumakarla. Perhaps I would say, even if the point is to beautify the sukkah, it doesn't mitigate the concern. It's still called mesachich b'davar makabel tuma, and the sukkah would be puzzled. So there's no raya to Rav Chisda. Continues the Gemara. So now we learned a interesting concept that decorative items are considered batal to your sukkah. Rav Chisda goes to the extent of saying that even sheets strung beneath your schach won't do any harm because they're batal to the schach. Continuing in the same vein, says the Gemara Itmar, we learned, Noyei sukkah ein mematin b'sukkah. Sukkah decorations don't minimize the size of your sukkah. What does this mean? Suppose the sukkah was more than 20 amma high, and he hung a sheet below his schach. It won't do anything. It's not going to lessen the height of the sukkah. It won't be machshir the sukkah because Noyei sukkah are batal to the schach, and they can't be considered separate entities to lessen the size of the sukkah. Likewise, if you have a very short sukkah, barely 10 tefachim high, you have some sheets hanging off your schach, it's okay. It's not going to lessen the height of the sukkah, and the sukkah is still considered to have 10 tefachim of space, and it's kosher. Amar of Ashi, that's only if we're speaking about height. Uminatzad b'matim. But if the noyei sukkah are to be found along the sides, along the wall of the sukkah, a sukkah which is barely 7 by 7 tefachim, now you have a problem because the sheets and the decorations are taking away from your 7 tefachim. You don't know where to sit, nowhere to live. In this case, we have to look at it practically. And the sukkah is not considered kosher. Says Rashi 6 lines from the top. Ein mematin. As far as height, it's not going to minimize the sukkah. Kroman aprusin lamala lenoi. Sheets which were strung up on top, below the schach, to decorate the sukkah. Ein mematin begevoya me'esrim. They will not affect a sukkah which is higher than 20. Lach shira, to make it kosher. We don't say, well, the decorations are now lessening its height. The lav min schach aninu. It's not part of the schach. The ischach havu. Because were it considered schach, have a mifsala mishum mekabel tumah, then you would be worse off. You're using schach which is possible. So therefore, apparently this is not considered schach. It's batal to the schach. It's not a schach on its own. And therefore, it doesn't have any effect on the height of the sukkah. It can't be machshir a sukkah above 20. Likewise, says Rashi, v'loy lepoisla mishum prosam yud. If the sukkah is barely 10 tefachim high and you have some sheets hanging there below 10 tefachim, encroaching in the 10 tefach space, you're still okay. Asks Tosis, what do you mean? Back on Avdalad we learned that if you have a sukkah barely 10 tefachim high and some hutzim, some of those low-hanging leaves or branches, encroaching, coming into the 10 tefach space, a sukkah is not really a sukkah, dira srucha. It's a sukkah which isn't fit for living. So Taisus, why over here by the Noyei sukkah we're not concerned about that? Answers Taisus, there's a difference between leaves and decorations. The shani hacha, says Taisus, here it's different. Why? The lenoi asuyin. We're speaking about decorations, which enhance the experience, enhance the dira. In which case, even if you're perhaps a bit cramped, it's still considered a makom dira, and the sukkah is kosher, provided they're coming from the top. But if they're coming from the sides, in which case you literally don't have where to sit, right? You need at least 7 tefachim. In that case, the Gemara says it's possible. Continues the Gemara 4 lines from the top. Min Yamin, that was his name, Avdei de Ravashi, he was the slave, the servant of Ravashi. Itmishale ketunta, his kesenis, his shirt, its mishal got soaked. B'maya, in water. So it dropped into the water, got soaked. The shatcha, and he went ahead and he spread out the kesenis to dry. Where? Amit talalta. Talalta is the sukkah. Tal is like tsail. So on the sukkah, which is a shade provider. So he put his wet shirt over the sukkah. Amalei Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi turns to him, Dalye, remove it. Delay leinru. So that people shouldn't say, Kamesachachi, b'davar makabel tumah. Look, they're using a shirt for schach. It's not suitable for schach. It's makabel tumah. What's the problem? V'alkachazilei. What do you mean? Says the Gemara, everybody will see it, that this thing is wet. V'alkachazilei derativa. The shirt is wet. It's just there to dry. I meant to say, once it dries, take care to remove that shirt, not to create a wrong impression. Itma, we learned. Noye sukkah hamaflagen mimena abba. So we learned that sukkah decorations are bottled to the schach and don't pose a concern, even if the noye sukkah are sheets, which are makabel tumah, they're bottled to the schach. They're not reckoned on their own. Now, how close to the schach must they be hung to be considered part of the schach? We have a machlekes. Noye sukkah hamaflagen mimena abba. Sukkah decorations which are 4 tfachim below your schach. Rav Nachman Amar Kshera. That's still okay, because he holds, since he placed it there for the purpose of decorating the sukkah, it's bottled to the schach, even though it's hanging 4 tfachim away from the schach, as opposed to Rav Chizda. V'Rabbi bar Rav Huna Amri Psula. They hold that's too far. 4 tfachim is already a makom chasher. Interesting that these two, Rav Chizda and Rabbi Rav Huna, on Amar Aleph, applied the same shear, a 4 tefach gap, with respect to the minimum shear of the upper sukkah, which will now present a sukkah tachat sukkah concern. Here as well, they apply the same concept to noye sukkah. Unless the sukkah decoration is hanging within 4 tefachim to the schach, it's too far. It doesn't relate. It's a makom chashav in between. And now, anyone sitting beneath that decoration is really sitting under schach pas. And the person will speak out, or speaking that the schach is large enough to be considered schach pas, 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Says the Gemara, there was a story with Rav Chizda v'Rabbi bar Rav Huna. Ikluhu, the Reish Galusa. They came to the Reish Galusa's home, the head of the community in Bavel, Adam Gadol. They came to visit on Sukkot. Agninu Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, who was in charge of the Reish Galusa, he went ahead and he put them to sleep where? Besukkah shenoyeha muflagin mimeno arba tvachim. He found just the right sukkah for them. He wanted to gauge their reaction. He put them into a sukkah whose decorations were muflagin mimena, were hanging at a distance of 4 tefachim from the schach. Muflagin mimena arba tvachim. Ishtiku. His guests remained silent. They didn't protest. So next morning, Rav Nachman tells them, Hadabu Rabbanan. Mishmatai, what happened to you? Did you retract? Did you go back on your shita? Look, you slept in a sukkah, which according to you is possible. They told him, no, we still hold our ground. Anan shluchim mitzvah. Actually, we're on the way to doing a mitzvah, to go greet our Rebbe. It's a mitzvah. And therefore, since we are shluchei mitzvah, we're p'turim min sukkah. We're exempt from mitzvah sukkah altogether. And therefore, even though the sukkah is possible, for us it's not a concern. Now Tosfos points out that, of course, the p'tur is only because it would interfere with their mitzvah. So Tosfos kegoyin shoyu misbatla min ha-mitzvah hayu machzirin achas sukkah acheres. It would make it difficult for them to go find another sukkah. They would lose sleep. They wouldn't be able to be mekayim the mitzvah that they came to do. In which case, it's one or the other, and we say they're pater from sukkah. Okay, so we discussed the concept of noye sukkah. Rav Chizda tells us even a sheet strung beneath your schach doesn't pose a concern if it's there for decorative purposes. Now, how close to the schach must it be? According to Rav Chizda and Rav Huna, within 4. According to Rav Nachman, even more than 4, perhaps up to 10 tefachim. It's not clear in the Gemara what the maximum is. We learned as well that noyei sukkah are not going to affect the size of the sukkah if they're coming off the top, but they will affect the size if they're coming from the side. And we learned as well that noyei sukkah are technically muktzah. They're designated for sukkah use throughout the entire Yom Tov unless he preconditioned, he made a t'nai, in which case then there's no kedusha applied to the noyei sukkah. Getting back to the Mishnah, where this fellow is going to sleep beneath a canopy, in which case we say you're in an oil, you're not in the sukkah. Says the Gemara, Amar Vid Amar Shmuel, Mutar Lishan, Bekila B'sukkah, Afal Pishi Yesh Lagag. He meant to know that one may sleep inside a canopy called a kila, even though it has a roof, meaning even though it's a flat canopy. We're speaking about a sheet strung over 4 poles rising out of the 4 sides of his bed. That's okay. Suppose this kila is not 10 tefachim high. In that case, it's not really an oil. It's not creating a reshus, which needs to be at least 10 tefachim high, as we learned earlier in the Masechta. And therefore, sleeping beneath it doesn't pose a concern. You're still in your sukkah. So again, Shmuel says a chiddush that a kila, a canopy, even though it's a flat-headed canopy, that's okay because it's less than 10 tefachim. Tashma, we're going to have a kasha on Shmuel. Brisa says, Yoshem bekila b'sukkah loy yotze de chavase. If one sleeps in a kila, he's not yotze. He's out of the sukkah. He's in an oil. Hachamay skinan. Says the Gemara, the Brisa is speaking where the kila is 10 tefachim high, in which case it is considered an oil. Kishagvoya asara. Shmuel was speaking if it's not 10 tefachim high. Meisvei, listen to this kasha. Hayash and tachas hamita b'sukkah. If one sleeps under a bed inside a sukkah, once again, lo yotze de chivasei. The Gemara is assuming the bed is not 10 tefachim high. So we see that even if this canopy, bed, etc., is less than 10 tefachim, he's considered out of the sukkah. It's a kasha on Shmuel. Hatirgim was Shmuel, but Shmuel himself interpreted that Mishnah to be speaking b'mita gvaya asara, a bed which is 10 tefachim high. And therefore, he's out of the sukkah. Tashma, listen to this raya from our Mishnah. The Mishnah gives us a list of concerns. One of them being Oishe Pires al Gabe Kinoifais Psula. If you spread a canopy above the Kinoifais, those 4 poles, in which case you have a flat top, this canopy is considered an oil. One beneath it is not in the sukkah. The Gemara is assuming it's less than 10 tefachim. Answers the Gemara, some nami there as well. We're speaking the Gvihi Asara, that the canopy is 10 tefachim high, in which case it poses a concern. But in the Brisa, it doesn't seem that we're speaking about a 10 tefach high canopy. The Brisa says like this. We have 2 types of canopies. We have the double pole canopy, in which case the canopy comes up like a point, like an overturned V. And we have the 4 pole canopy, which has a flat top. Says the Brisa, not klitin, that's the shnaim, the one with the 2 poles. The kinoifos, that's the one that has arba, 4 poles. What's the halacha? Pi reis al gabi kinoifos psula. For how strong is canopy over the 4-poled structure, which gives it a flat top, that's an oil, and it's possible for sukkah use. Al gabi naklitin kshira, but if it's just over the 2 poles arrangement, in which case it doesn't really have a gag, it's not an oil, and it's kosher for sukkah use. Ubilvad, says the Brisa, provided shelo yehu naklitin, that these poles, these naklitin, shelo yehu naklitin gavoyim namita asara, they don't rise 10 tefach above your bed. So the Brisa is speaking where the canopies are situated within tefach to your bed. In which case we say, if it's a pointy top, if it's not klitin, it's not an oil, and you're okay. If it's a flat top, it's the 4-pole arrangement, it's the kinoifos, that even if it's less than 10 tefachim high, it's possible, it's an oil. Right? Mechlal de kinoifos, aval pish en gevoina asara. It's pretty clear that if it's kinoifos, those 4 poles with a flat top canopy, even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's no good. Right? The Brisa clearly says that the distinction between the 2-pole and the 4-pole is only if it's within 10. Apparently, if it's a 4-pole arrangement, it's a flat kind of canopy, even if it's low in height, if it's not 10 tefachim, it's still a problem. It's a kasha on Shmuel, who tells us that only if it's 10 tefachim is it considered an oil and presents a concern. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Shani kinoifes tekvi. Shmuel was not speaking about kinoifes. He discussed a kila, which is a temporary canopy, here today, gone tomorrow. In which case, unless it's 10 tefachim high, it's not considered an oil. Here we're speaking about kinoifes, which are kavua. They're firmly established and attached to one's bed. In which case, since it gives that resemblance of permanence, even if it's not high enough, if it's not 10 tefachim in height, it's still considered an oil. Taisa says it's a chumrah. Well, technically, the minimum height for oil is 10 tefachim, but here, since it gives the resemblance, the impression of something permanent, it appears like he's out of the sukkah when he sleeps beneath this arrangement. Therefore, even if it's below 10 tefachim, it's a concern. As opposed to the kilo, which is not something kavua, in which case, unless it's 10 tefachim high, that doesn't pose a concern. So it's either or. Either one of these two factors presents a problem. Either on account of its permanence, in which case even if it's low in height, if it's less than 10 tefachim, or if it's something flimsy and temporary, but it's big enough to be reckoned with. It's a kilo l'mala ma'asara, in which case it's going to present a concern. And one more thing, the naklitin, that pointy canopy, if it's below 10, that's okay, but if it's above 10, in which case it's large in size, there as well, it's going to be a problem. Tosfos points out that, of course, it's only a chumrah d'Rabbanan because it's not really an oil. It comes to a point. But since it looks big, it looks like an oil, you can't sleep beneath it. Okay, so in any case, we see that it's basically either or. Either a size, 10 tefachim, or when it's something that has permanence, even below 10 tefachim is considered a problem regarding sleeping beneath it in a sukkah. Says the Gemara, "Vari sukkah gabi sukkah tekviyah." What about a sukkah above another sukkah, which is something kavua, a real set, established structure? V'amar Shmuel, and Shmuel himself told us an Amar Aleph. The only reason the bottom sukkah is puzzle is if the top sukkah is large enough to be considered a kosher sukkah. It needs to be 10 tefachim high. Why? It's something kavua. If it's something kavua, then even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it should be reckoned with. Just as over here we say, something which is kavua doesn't need to be 10 tefachim high. Says the Gemara, how could you compare? Amri, the Bnei Yeshiva responded, some in the case of the double-decker sukkah, the lemifsal sukkah, when we're trying to invalidate a sukkah, meaning the top sukkah is trying to go ahead and make the bottom sukkah puzzle because it's not considered a sukkah beneath a sukkah ba'asara. Unless the upper sukkah is 10 tefachim high, is sheer kashrus, it's not considered a proper sukkah, in which case the bottom sukkah is not a sukkah beneath a sukkah. So when you come to invalidate your neighbor, you have to be something important. As opposed to our case, where you have a canopy within a sukkah. You're not trying to puzzle the sukkah. The sukkah is perfectly fine. We're speaking specifically about the fellow lying beneath that canopy. Where am I? Am I in the sukkah underneath a schach, or perhaps am I detached from the schach? Am I beneath an oil? Here it's different. You need less. Over here we were trying to create an oil and say, well, the fellow beneath it happens to be outside the sukkah, but even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's still considered an oil, and he's outside the sukkah. Says Rashi, around 2 lines up from our location in the Gemara. We're speaking about sukkah tachas sukkah. Kol kama lemikray al yon sukkah. As long as the upper one is not yet considered a proper sukkah, lemifsal tachtoina. You can't consider the bottom one a sukkah beneath a sukkah. Therefore, over there you need to have 10 tefachim the upper one. It's a sukkah. It's a kosher sukkah. Now the bottom one is sukkah beneath a sukkah. As opposed to our case, the l'shvuya oyla. We're just trying to make just an oil. So you shouldn't sleep beneath it. Aval shar sukkah kshera. But of course the rest of the sukkah is kosher. We're not invalidating the sukkah. I mean, everywhere else in the sukkah, it's still kosher. Perhaps even if the sukkah is barely 7 by 7, this oil is not going to lessen the size of the sukkah, not trying to affect the sukkah. Batzer masor, now we have an oil. Even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's still an oil, heicha de kviya, when it has permanence. So again, as far as the structure, yeah. Structurally, a sukkah has to be 10 tefachim. But as far as, where am I? The fellow's location. If I'm underneath any type of oil, I am not in my sukkah. I am situated outside the sukkah. And that works even if it's less than 10 tefachim, provided it has kviyus. So conclusion, we learned regarding sleeping beneath various forms of oil. So if it's beneath a mita, if it's less than 10 tefachim, you're okay. Beneath a kila, some sort of temporary canopy, once again, less than 10 tefachim, it's okay. Beneath the naklitin, which is that two-pole canopy, which comes to a pointy top, if it's less than 10 tefachim, you're okay. But if it's more than 10 tefachim, in this case, although technically it's still not an oil, doesn't have a flat top, but it's also midrabban. Regarding a kenoifis, which is kavua, so that's the four-pole arrangement with a flat top, but it's more than a kila. This one has permanence. In this case, we say that even if it's less than 10 tefachim high, it's asur, it gives the appearance as though you're out of the sukkah, and it's asur midrabban. Says the Gemara, Amar of Tachlifa Barabi Miyamar Shmuel, Hayashin v'kila orim. If one happens to be sleeping in a canopy, and he's undressed. Comes morning, he wants to say Kriya Shema. Moitzi roishe chutz l'kila. He can extend his hand outside this canopy, v'kayru Kriya Shema, and read Kriya Shema. Why? Since the kila is not considered a proper oil, so we don't say that the head, which is outside the kila, is sort of drawn back into the kila and connected back to the makom haguf. So if it's a real oil, then we say, well, wherever the person is, that's where his head is. Even though technically he's outside, but his body is here, so his head is here. But in this case, where it's just a kila, it's just a temporary canopy, we don't apply that concept, and we say, it's like a robe, it's like a garment, it's like an article of clothing. His body is covered with the kila, and his head is outside, that's fine. It's like a person wearing a robe, and his head is uncovered, that's fine. So you can read Krishma. Meisvei, v'kash from a brisa, hayoshem v'kila aram. If one happens to find himself in a kila undressed, lo yaitzi roishe chutz l'kila v'yikar Krishma, he can't do that. Apparently, the brisa considers the kila like a structure, like a bias, in which case, since most of his body is in the structure, we draw his head back into the structure as well. It connects and relates to the makom haguf. And it's as though he's reading Krishma in the presence of somebody undressed, which may not be done. So it's a kasha on Shmuel, because here we see that the kila is considered like a bias. And Shmuel does not consider the kila like a bias. Shmuel says you can sleep beneath the kila, provided it's less than 10 tefachim high. Says the Gemara, no, we're speaking kisha gvaya asara, when the kila is 10 tefachim high, in which case has a din, a permanent structure. In fact, it seems that this approach is correct. The Tani Sefer, the Brisa continues and says, what does this halacha compare to? To a person who's standing undressed in a house, in a room, a permanent structure, in which case he can't stick his head out the window and be Kriya Krishma, because since his body is in a bias, he can't just separate the two. His head is sort of drawn back to the makom haguf, and it's as though he's being Kriya Krishma in the presence of someone undressed. And likewise, this kila has the same halacha. Shema Mino, it's pretty clear. We're speaking about a kila which has prominence, which conforms to the size, 10 tefachim high, in which case it's considered like a bias, as opposed to Shmuel, who's speaking about a kila which is less than tefachim high. Concludes the Gemara. Bias nami. Listen to this. But if it's a real bias, a real room, a real permanent structure, afal bisha in gavoya asara, even if it's not 10 tefachim high, given the kaviyah, since this house is really something of permanence, oilahu, it's a real oil, in which case you can't stick your head out the window and read Krishma, because the bais is really a structure. And now your head is drawn back to the Makam Aguf. And you're reading Krishma, the presence of someone undressed. The loigar mikinaifis, because it's no worse than the kinaifis discussed earlier, which we consider to be something kavua, in which case, even though it's less than 10 tefachim, its permanence gives it chashivas and gives it a din of an oil. Okay, time for a brief chazara. We learned about sukkah al gabi sukkah, in which case the bottom one is puzzle provided the upper one has some height. 3 shitas we had, either a tefach like tumas oil, 4 tefachim emakam chashav, 10 tefachim the sheer hechshar sukkah. Spreading a sheet over or below the schach, that's schach puzzle. Spreading a sheet over the canopy arrangement, according to Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, the problem is only if the canopy is at least 10 tefachim high or has some permanence to it. Sukkah decorations are batal to the schach, according to one shita, provided they're close enough within 4 tefachim, according to Rav Nachman, even more than 4 tefachim. Kol tov to you and atzlach rabba.